Good evening, everyone. Before the stories begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. The more you engage, the more these chilling tales will return to your feed. Now, let's step into the dark together. When we moved back into our childhood home, I thought it would be a chance to reconnect with my sister. After our parents died, we hadn't spoken much. Life had pulled us in opposite directions. Me into a job I didn't care for in Cincinnati, and her into, well, whatever she'd been doing in that small Kentucky town she refused to leave. Her name's Olivia, and she was always the quiet one growing up. The kind of kid who talked to imaginary friends long past the age when it was cute. I was the practical older brother, the one who rolled my eyes when she'd whisper to the air, and then smile like something invisible had answered back. When Mom passed, Olivia asked if we could move back into the old house for a while. Said she didn't want it to sit empty. I agreed, more out of guilt than anything else. The place hadn't changed much. The same faded wallpaper, the same narrow hallway that creaked no matter how lightly you stepped. But the air inside felt thicker now, like the walls had been sealed too long. Olivia had already been living there for a few months before I arrived. The first thing I noticed was how different she looked. Pale, restless. Her eyes darted when I spoke, like she was half listening to someone else. That first night, while unpacking, I caught her standing in her old bedroom, our parents' room now converted into hers, just staring at the wall mirror, not checking her reflection, not brushing her hair, just standing there murmuring under her breath. "Liv?" I asked. She jumped, turned, smiled too quickly. "Oh, hey, sorry, I didn't hear you." "Who were you talking to?" Her smile faltered. "Just myself." I didn't press. Grief makes people strange, I told myself. But over the next week, the whispering got worse. Sometimes I'd wake up at night to the faint sound of her voice through the wall, soft, rhythmic, like she was having a conversation. I'd knock, call her name, and she'd always respond cheerfully, too cheerfully, saying she couldn't sleep and was just thinking out loud. Then came the mirror. It had belonged to our mother. A tall antique piece with carved oak framing and an oval shape that distorted slightly around the edges. It always made me uncomfortable as a kid, like it was reflecting something extra, something beyond what you could see. One morning I came downstairs and found Olivia eating breakfast, humming softly. The mirror from her room was sitting against the living room wall. "Why'd you move that?" I asked. She looked up from her cereal, surprised. "What do you mean? It's always been there." "No, it hasn't. It's been upstairs since forever." Her expression shifted, confused, then blank. "Maybe you're remembering wrong." That night I went to bed unsettled. I told myself she'd just moved it while cleaning. But around 2 a.m. I woke to a faint tapping sound coming from the hallway. I opened my door. The house was dark except for the faint glow of a nightlight near the stairs. And there was Olivia, standing in front of the mirror. The same mirror I'd seen downstairs that morning. Except now it was back upstairs, leaning against the wall outside her room. She was whispering again. Her voice was low, almost tender, like she was soothing someone. "Olivia," I said, stepping closer. "What the hell are you doing?" She turned slowly, her face pale in the nightlight glow. "I told you," she whispered. "I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to her." "Her who?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to the mirror. "You don't remember her? You used to talk to her too." I felt my stomach drop. "What are you talking about, Olivia? There was no her. You were a kid with an imaginary friend." She shook her head slowly, that faint, eerie smile returning. "Not imaginary. You stopped talking to her after the fire, but she never stopped talking to you." The words made something cold crawl up my spine. "The fire. She was talking about the one that happened when I was 8. The one that burned the old shed out back. Dad had said it started from faulty wiring. but I remembered smoke, screaming, and a moment where Olivia had stood outside the shed door, calling my name like she knew I was inside. Except I wasn't. I didn't say anything. I just backed away, leaving her standing in front of that mirror, whispering to someone I couldn't see. The next morning, she was gone. I checked every room. Nothing. The mirror was still there, leaned up against the wall. I went to touch it, but the surface was icy cold, even though sunlight was streaming through the window. My reflection looked pale, distorted, like the light didn't hit me right. Then I noticed something in the corner of the glass. It looked like a handprint. Small. Too small to be Olivia's. I tried to wipe it away, but the more I rubbed, the clearer it got, pressed from inside the glass. That night I found Olivia sitting cross-legged in her room, whispering again. The mirror had been moved back upstairs. It faced the doorway now. "Liv, where have you been?" I asked. She didn't answer. She was staring into her own reflection. I walked around and saw her eyes weren't focused on herself at all. They were fixed on the faint shape of another girl behind her reflection. Pale skin, hollow eyes, hair the color of ash. When she finally spoke, it wasn't to me. "See? I told you he'd come back." The voice that answered didn't come from Olivia's mouth. It came from the mirror. Soft, sing-song, like a memory half forgotten. "You left me." The glass shivered. Just slightly, but enough to make the hair rise on my arms. I grabbed Olivia's wrist. "We're leaving. Now." She didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on the reflection. The lights in the room flickered. The air turned sharp and metallic. For a moment, the reflection split. Two of her side by side. One normal, one pale and still, smiling that same unnatural smile. Then the light snapped off. I yanked her toward the hallway, stumbling in the dark. "Olivia, move." But she dug her heels in. "She's part of us," she whispered. "You just forgot." A faint glow bled through the doorway behind us. The mirror was shining, its surface rippling like water. I could hear something inside it breathing. I pulled harder, dragging her away down the hall into my old room. I slammed the door and pressed my back against it, both of us panting. For a while, the house was silent. Then we heard it. 3 slow knocks. Not at the front door. At the mirror on the other side of the wall. Olivia started crying. "She doesn't want me anymore. She wants you." "Stop," I said, shaking her. "You're scaring me." But she just stared through me, eyes empty. "She says you were the one who let her burn." The memory hit like a punch. I remembered the fire, the smoke, and my own small hands locking the shed door to keep Olivia from playing inside. The smell of kerosene, the sound of something scratching from within. I thought I'd imagined that scratching. I thought it was an animal, but I remembered another sound, faint and pleading, a little girl's voice. "Let me out." The mirror in the other room cracked. When I went back to look, Olivia was gone again. The mirror stood upright, a thin fissure running down its center. My reflection looked off. A half-second delay between my movements and its own. Then it smiled when I didn't. I don't remember running. I don't remember calling the police. I just remember standing outside as the house caught fire again. Same as before, same bright orange glow spilling from the upstairs window. They said they found no one inside. No remains. No Olivia. Just a warped mirror frame among the ashes. Now I rent a small apartment in Columbus. I don't own much. But this morning when I woke up, there was a box sitting at my door. No label, no sender. Inside, wrapped in burnt fabric, was a small shard of glass, cool to the touch. And when I tilted it toward the light, I saw 2 reflections, mine and Olivia's, smiling behind me. When our father died, the will left the farmhouse to both of us. I wanted to sell it, but my brother Garrett refused. He said, "The house stays with the blood." I thought he was being sentimental, but the way he said it, the way his eyes fixed on me, made it sound more like a warning. The farmhouse sat on 30 acres of overgrown land in rural West Virginia, the kind of property where trees pressed in so tight you could barely see the sky. We'd grown up here, and back then, the woods had always scared me. Garrett, though, he'd loved them. He used to wander for hours, building things from scrap wood and rusted tools he found in the shed. Dad used to yell at him for wasting time, said the barn was off limits, that it had bad memories. When I returned home for the first time in 12 years, Garrett had already torn the boards off the barn doors. Inside, a single hanging bulb cast a sickly yellow glow over piles of lumber and metal sheets. The smell hit me first. Oil, rust, and something faintly sour, like damp concrete. "What are you doing out here?" I asked. He smiled without looking up from his work. "Finishing what Dad started." The hammer struck the wood with slow, deliberate rhythm. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You'll see," he said. "You'll understand soon." Garrett had always been strange, but now there was something mechanical in the way he moved. Like he wasn't just building something, he was following steps he'd memorized. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every hour, I'd hear the faint creak of floorboards in the hallway, the sound of something dragging across wood. The smell from the barn drifted through the open window, iron, soil, and decay. The next morning, I went to check on him. Inside the barn stood a structure that hadn't been there before, a room within a room. 4 narrow walls of raw lumber, sealed with metal sheets, the seams thick with tar. There were no windows, no vents, only one door. It was bolted from the outside. "What the hell is that?" I asked. Garrett wiped sweat from his brow. "It's a chamber. Dad called it the atonement room." "Atonement for what?" "For us," he said quietly. "For what we are." I laughed, half out of nerves. "You've been out here too long, man." He turned to face me then, and I froze. His hands were raw, blistered from work. His eyes were bloodshot, pupils wide. "You don't remember what happened down here when we were kids?" I shook my head. "Dad locked me in one of these rooms for 3 days, he said. Said it would burn the sickness out. Said one of us had to keep the family clean." I took a step back. "Garrett, whatever he did to you, he didn't do it to me," he interrupted. "He did it for me. So now it's my turn." He reached behind the workbench and lifted something wrapped in burlap. When he unwrapped it, I saw the shape of a wooden crossbar, the kind that locks across a door from the outside. "This one's for you," he said. I stared at him, unable to speak. "Garrett, this isn't funny." He didn't blink. "It's not supposed to be." The door to the metal-lined room stood slightly open. The air that leaked from it was cold, unnaturally cold, and smelled of wet iron. When I turned to leave, I noticed fresh dirt on the ground near the back of the barn. Not piles, graves. 4 small mounds in a row, each marked with a short plank of wood. The names carved into them made my throat close up. Dad, Mom, Grandma, Granddad. 4 generations. And next to them, a 5th plank. Blank. Garrett followed my gaze and smiled. "It's waiting for one of us." The words hung in the air like fog. Garrett's face was expressionless, his tone calm, but the way he said it made my stomach twist. "You're scaring me," I said. He tilted his head slightly as if studying me. "Dad said fear means the blood remembers." I backed toward the barn doors, heart pounding. "Garrett, listen. Whatever Dad did to you, it wasn't right. It was abuse. You don't have to keep—" He cut me off with a sharp laugh. "Abuse?" He pointed at the graves. "You think they died from abuse? They died because they refused to finish it. They left it to me." The generator buzzed weakly. The single light above us flickered, throwing shadows that stretched unnaturally long across the walls. The tar seams on the metal room glistened like veins. I whispered, "What's in there?" He smiled faintly. everything that came before us. I turned to run. Garrett lunged, grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise. He pulled me back toward the structure, his breath hot against my ear. "Just one night," he said. "That's all it takes. Then you'll see what he showed me." I shoved him off, hard enough that he stumbled and sprinted out of the barn. My truck was parked halfway up the drive. I didn't look back until I was inside with the engine roaring. Garrett didn't chase me. He just stood in the doorway of the barn, hands at his sides, watching the headlights sweep across his face. He looked disappointed. I drove straight to a motel 2 towns over and didn't sleep. By morning, I'd convinced myself he'd finally lost it. Maybe the years alone had pushed him over the edge. I called the sheriff's office and reported unsafe conditions at the property. They said they'd send someone out. But when I went back that evening, the house was dark. The barn door was open. Garrett's truck was still there. The smell hit before I reached the doorway, metallic and sweet, like rusted blood and oil. Inside, the generator still hummed, though the light had dimmed to a dull orange. The air was thick with smoke. The room he built, the atonement room, was shut tight. The bolts locked from the outside. "Garrett," I shouted, "are you in there?" No answer. Something dripped from the bottom of the door, a dark, oily substance pooling into the dirt. I stepped closer, gagging at the smell. It wasn't oil. It was blood. I unlatched the bolts and pulled the door open. The air that came out was freezing, sharp enough to sting my lungs. Inside there was no body, just a chair and the walls, covered in handprints. Dozens of them. Some large, some small, pressed deep into the metal like they'd been burned in. In the center of the chair sat a burlap sack. I reached for it with shaking hands and peeled it open. Inside were old tools, hammers, chisels, nails, and a photograph. It was Dad, younger, standing beside Grandpa. Between them, a small boy with wide, terrified eyes. Garrett. They were in front of a structure identical to this one. On the back of the photo, written in my father's handwriting, were the words, "He lasted 3 nights. The blood's clean again." I staggered back, bile burning my throat. My flashlight beam caught movement on the far wall, a shadow shifting against the metal. Then, faintly, something hit from the inside. Once. Twice. I stepped closer, thinking maybe Garrett had somehow gotten trapped behind the panel. The metal flexed outward, denting like something was pushing through. Then a whisper, low and wet, came from behind it. "Your turn." The lights cut out. When I came to, I was outside, face down in the dirt. The barn was gone. Not burned, just gone. Nothing but ash and a square of scorched soil. They never found Garrett. I sold the property a month later, but every night since, I wake to the same sound. 3 soft knocks, somewhere close, and the smell of tar. When my brother was admitted to St. Leonard's Psychiatric Hospital, I told myself it was for the best. He'd been unraveling for months, talking about voices in the vents, saying someone lived in the walls of his apartment, even cutting the power to his own place because he claimed the electricity was feeding her. His name's Calvin, 2 years older than me. Smart, funny, the kind of big brother who used to sneak me into movie theaters and defend me from Dad when he got drunk. I never thought I'd see him in a locked ward. When I arrived for my first visit, the air in the hospital felt sterile but wrong, too quiet. The receptionist smiled like someone forcing it, tapping at a computer that looked decades old. "Patient name?" she asked. "Calvin Porter. Room 12. Her smile faltered just slightly before she handed me a visitor badge. "Follow the yellow line on the floor. Don't go past the end of the hall without an escort." I tried to laugh it off, but there was something in her tone, like she'd said those words too many times. Room 12 was at the very end of the corridor. The door had a glass slit just wide enough to see through. Inside, Calvin sat cross-legged on the floor, his back to the wall, staring at the ceiling. When the nurse unlocked the door, he didn't move. "Hey, Cal," I said softly. He turned his head, slow and deliberate, eyes unfocused for a second before locking on mine. "You shouldn't have come here, Riley." It was the first thing he'd said in weeks that made sense. But the way he said it, low, urgent, terrified, made my heart race. "I wanted to see you," I said, "to make sure you're okay." He shook his head. "They'll hear you." I looked around. "Who?" He pointed toward the vent above his bed. "She doesn't like when I talk about her." The nurse smiled politely and stepped out, locking the door behind her. When we were alone, I knelt beside him. "Cal, there's no one in the vents. You're safe here." He leaned in close. His breath smelled of metal and antiseptic. "You think I'm sick?" "I'm not. I'm keeping her in here." I swallowed. "Keeping who?" He smiled faintly. "The one who tried to leave with you?" That stopped me cold. "What are you talking about?" He looked at the door, lowered his voice. "After Dad died, you started sleepwalking. You don't remember, do you? You used to stand in the hallway whispering my name in two voices, yours and hers. She wanted to leave with you. I made sure she didn't." The words made my skin crawl. I wanted to believe it was just delusion, but something about the way he said it, the certainty, made it hard to breathe. Before I could respond, the overhead light flickered. A faint hum filled the air, like an old intercom switching on. Calvin's body tensed. "She's awake," he whispered. The vent above his bed rattled once. The sound was faint, metallic, like fingernails on steel. "Stop," I said, my voice shaking. "There's no one up there." But Calvin had already started humming. Low, rhythmic, tuneless. His hands pressed against his ears. "If I don't make noise, she'll start talking again." The sound stopped. The light steadied. He exhaled, trembling. "Don't come back, Riley. Please. If you visit again, she'll notice you too." When I left, the nurse asked if everything was okay. I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, just emotional." But as I walked down the hall, the vent above me groaned, a long metallic sigh that echoed overhead until I reached the lobby. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how, when we were kids, I'd wake to find Calvin sitting in the hallway, staring at nothing, saying, "She's back in the walls." Back then, I thought he was imagining things. Now I wasn't sure, because when I turned off the light in my apartment that night, the air vent above my bed made the exact same sound. A soft metal rattle. A breath behind the walls. I told myself it was air pressure, just the building settling, but the noise came again. Slower this time, deliberate, like someone dragging a nail across steel. By 3 a.m., I was sitting upright, staring at the vent. Every few seconds it shivered, then stilled. I finally grabbed a chair and unscrewed the cover. Cold air spilled out, and something else. The faintest smell of antiseptic. The same sterile scent from St. Leonard's. The next morning I drove back to the hospital. I told the staff I'd left my brother's watch behind. The receptionist didn't even check the log, just waved me through like she didn't want to argue. The yellow line on the floor looked brighter now, as if it had been repainted overnight. When I reached room 12, the door was open. Calvin wasn't inside. A new nurse stood there, stacking linens. I asked where he was. She blinked, confused. "We don't have a patient by that name." My stomach turned. "He was here yesterday. Calvin Porter." She checked the clipboard, frowned, then said quietly, "Room 12's been empty for 3 months." I pushed past her. The mattress was gone, the vent above the bed sealed with a metal plate bolted to the wall. But someone had written across it in black marker, "She hears through air." I backed out into the hall, the overhead light flickering as I did. Down the corridor, every vent hummed faintly. A low resonance, like dozens of voices whispering together. Then from behind me, A man's voice. "Riley?" I turned. Calvin stood halfway down the hall, barefoot, hospital gown stained around the cuffs. His eyes looked sunken but alive. "Cal, Jesus, where have you been?" He raised a finger to his lips. "Quiet. They'll know you're here." "Who?" He pointed toward the vents. "They made a deal. To keep her contained, someone has to listen. If no one listens, she moves." "Moves where?" He stared at me with something like pity. "You took the vent off your wall, didn't you?" My mouth went dry. "She's in the airflow now," he whispered. "She followed you home." Before I could reply, alarms shrieked through the ward. Red lights pulsed overhead. Doors along the corridor slammed shut, automatically locking. Calvin's face drained of color. "They know she's loose," he said. "She's looking for a new room." I grabbed his arm. "We're leaving." He didn't move. "You can't leave sound, Riley." The intercom crackled. A voice, female, calm, official, announced, "Containment protocol in effect. All ventilation seals engaging." From inside the vents came a groan, deep and metallic, followed by the sharp bang of something slamming against the ducts. Screams erupted from other rooms. Calvin pulled me toward the stairwell. The emergency door was locked tight. He banged on it, desperate. It's always the same. One sibling keeps her quiet, the other forgets. That's how she survives. "Calvin, stop." He turned, tears cutting through grime on his cheeks. "She picked me when we were kids. Now she wants you." The duct above us split open with a screech. Cold air burst out, whipping our hair, carrying the smell of rust and disinfectant. For a moment there was nothing inside but darkness. Then a shape pressed against the torn metal. A hand, skin pale and wet, fingers too long. Calvin shoved me backward. "Run!" He climbed onto the railing, grabbed the exposed edge of the vent, and hauled himself up inside. The metal folded around him as if it were alive. His voice echoed down the stairwell. "I'll keep her here, don't come back." The panel snapped shut. Silence. I stumbled down the corridor until I found an exit that hadn't sealed yet. Outside, the air felt thick, humming against my skin. A faint vibration followed me all the way to the parking lot, like a low breath moving through pipes underground. That night, in my apartment, I taped cardboard over every vent. I moved the bed to the center of the room, but around midnight, the tape fluttered. A tiny gust leaked through, cold and steady. A whisper threaded out, soft enough to almost be mistaken for wind. "He's tired now. Your turn to listen." The vent exhaled once, slow and warm, like someone breathing against my ear. When Dad died, the only thing he left us was the radio station. It wasn't much. A squat concrete building sitting on the edge of the Alaskan highway, surrounded by endless pine and silence. But for my brother Noah and me, it was all we had left of him. The tower rose crookedly out of the snow like a rusted needle. On clear nights you could hear our broadcast from 30 miles away. I ran the day shows, weather, traffic updates, lost dog announcements. Noah handled the graveyard shift. His idea of therapy, he said. It's just me, the mic, and the dark. But after that winter storm in February, something changed. It started small, faint background noises that didn't belong. While I was doing the morning weather, I'd hear whispers behind the static, fragments of words, breathing. Once, a single laugh. When I played back the recordings, it wasn't there. Clean as always. Noah joked it was just Dad tuning in from the afterlife. But the night he let me sit in on his midnight show, I realized it wasn't a joke. It was 12:47 a.m. The wind outside howled like the world was ending, snow battering the tower in waves. Noah leaned back in his chair, headphones on, voice calm as he read letters from listeners. We didn't get many calls anymore, just truckers sometimes or lonely locals looking to hear another human voice. The phone line blinked once, then again. Noah nodded at me to patch it through. I hit the switch expecting another night driver or bored fisherman. WNRD radio, Noah said, smooth and practiced. You're live. What's your name? Silence. Then a soft female voice. You already know. Noah frowned. Who's this? The line crackled. You're sitting wrong. You always lean too far to the left when you talk. He straightened instantly, eyes cutting to me. Is this someone from town? A pause, then quieter. You should check the window. We both turned. Through the frost-glazed glass behind him, a faint handprint appeared, slow, deliberate, from the outside. Noah ripped off his headphones. What the hell? When I opened the door, the night hit like a blade. There were no footprints, no signs anyone had been there. Just our antenna groaning against the wind. Back inside, the phone line was still open. The voice spoke again. Don't leave me alone in the dark, Noah. He froze. His face drained of color. Who is this? I demanded. The voice giggled softly, a sound so familiar it made my stomach drop. You really don't remember me? Noah whispered. That's not possible. Static swelled, swallowing her laughter. Who was that? I asked. He didn't answer at first, then quietly. Lena. I blinked. Our sister's been dead for 10 years. He nodded slowly, eyes on the mic. Yeah, I know. The line went dead. For a long time we didn't speak. The only sound was the wind outside and the faint buzz of the transmitter. Noah stood up, walked to the window, and traced his hand over the frozen glass where the print had been. She used to do that, he said softly, when she wanted to come inside. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the power flickered. The generator coughed and died. I told Noah we needed to shut down until we could get it fixed, but he refused. She's not done talking, he said. She wants me to finish what Dad started. What the hell does that mean? He didn't answer. That evening, while I was out checking the tower cables, I heard the faint echo of his voice over the open airwaves. It was our signal, but not from inside the booth. The tone was wrong, deeper, slower, each word stretched, and beneath it, another voice breathing in time with his. I ran back to the control room. The on-air light glowed red, but Noah wasn't inside. The mic was on, the chair empty, the phone line blinking. I picked it up. On the other end, a whisper. You shouldn't have left us, Mia. The voice wasn't Noah's, and it wasn't Lena's either. It was mine. My own voice playing through the line, breathy, distorted, just wrong enough to make every hair on my arms rise. I dropped the receiver, stumbling back. The static bled into the room. A low drone that vibrated in my chest like a heartbeat. Then it stopped. Noah's voice came through the intercom, calm and hollow. You shouldn't answer when you don't recognize the caller. I turned. He was standing in the doorway, soaked from the snow, expression blank. His eyes were wrong, wide and glassy like he hadn't blinked in hours. Noah, what the hell is going on? He walked past me, sat down in the chair, and adjusted the mic. I told you she wasn't done. She just needed a clearer signal. She's dead, I snapped. Lena's gone. You have to stop this. He smiled faintly. You think I'm talking about Lena? The soundboard flickered. Every channel lit up one by one until the whole panel glowed like a Christmas tree. The air filled with faint overlapping whispers, not through the speakers but through the walls themselves, like the concrete had learned to speak. I grabbed his arm. We need to leave. He didn't move. Dad used to say the airwaves remember what they love. You know why the station still works when everything else up here dies? Because he built it on their bones. I stared at him horrified. Whose bones? He turned to me, voice low. Ours. The power surged. Every monitor blinked, showing flashes of our childhood. Grainy home videos we'd never digitized. Lena laughing in the snow. Dad holding the camera. And behind her, a reflection in the glass door that wasn't any of us. Something taller, thinner, its mouth moving a second too late. The feed crackled and cut out. "Noah, stop the playback," I shouted. He leaned closer to the mic. "She's almost through." The broadcast light above him pulsed red, faster, like it was syncing with his breathing. The static shifted pitch, no longer random but rhythmic, syllabic. Words forming through distortion. "Mia, stay on the line." The voice was mine again, but older, tired, breaking. I tore the main power switch down. The hum died. The tower outside went dark. But Noah kept talking. "No signal," he whispered. "Doesn't mean no transmission." And then, in the dead silence, from somewhere deep in the walls, the static returned. Faint, whispering in a loop. WNRD radio. Always live. The emergency lights came on, red and dull. I turned toward the glass booth. Noah was gone. The chair was empty, spinning slowly. The headset lay on the floor, mic still glowing faintly at the tip. I ran outside, the wind slicing my face. The snow had stopped. The antenna tower stood motionless, its lights dead. But from the base of it, I could hear faint voices whispering beneath the ice. Dozens of them. When I followed the sound, I found the hatch to the transmitter bunker ajar. I climbed down, flashlight shaking in my hand. The narrow space was lined with old reel-to-reel recorders, most still running, despite the power outage. Tape hissed through them, spinning endlessly. On every reel, our old broadcasts. But the dates were wrong. They were all marked next week. Then I heard Noah's voice behind me. "You're live, Mia." I turned, but the tunnel was empty. The flashlight flickered, and the air around me began to hum again, perfectly tuned to the frequency of my own voice. The recorder nearest to me clicked, starting a new loop. My voice came through, soft, almost pleading. "Don't come down here. Don't answer. Don't listen." I dropped the light. By the time I scrambled up the ladder, the snow outside was falling again. Slow, heavy flakes that muffled every sound except one. The tower. It had powered back on by itself. The beacon at the top blinked red against the storm. The signal was live, and through every radio for 50 miles, my voice played in perfect clarity. "Good evening, listeners. This is Mia Porter, filling in for Noah. Tonight's broadcast is dedicated to anyone who's still awake. If you're listening, stay close. Keep the lights low. Don't check the window." Outside the glass, a handprint formed, fresh and wet on the frost. And this time, it was mine. When you lose a sibling, people tell you the same thing. It gets easier. They mean well, but it's a lie. It doesn't get easier. It just gets quieter. My brother Evan and I drove back from the crematorium in silence. The urn sat between us on the truck seat, belted in like it was fragile glass. In a way, it was. Inside that smooth black jar was all that was left of Lily, our little sister, 25, gone from a car wreck on Highway 19. She'd always hated driving. That's what made it worse. Evan didn't speak for the whole ride. He kept his eyes locked on the road, jaw clenched, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The urn rattled slightly each time we hit a bump, like it was reminding us it was there. When we got home, he carried it inside and set it on the kitchen table. "I'll keep her in my room tonight," he said flatly. I didn't argue. He and Lily had been closer than anyone. That first night, I woke to the sound of the hallway floorboards creaking. The house was old and had always made noise, but this sounded deliberate. Slow, dragging steps moving from Evan's room to mine. Then a faint knock. 3 soft taps. I opened the door. No one there. The next morning, Evan looked pale. He hadn't slept. "She was talking," he said quietly. I heard her. I almost told him to stop, to get some rest, but the look in his eyes froze me. It wasn't madness. It was conviction. "She said she can't rest," he went on. "That she feels cold. We buried our parents young, So we knew grief's tricks. The brain finds ways to make you believe the dead aren't gone. But something about his tone made me uneasy. 2 days later, I found the urn in the living room. Evan was gone, but the lid was slightly open. Inside, the ashes weren't level anymore, and like something had shifted them. I weighed it on the kitchen scale, not sure why. It came out to 4.3 pounds. That night, I woke again to footsteps. When I checked Evan's room, he was asleep. But the urn wasn't on his dresser. It was on the floor beside his bed, the lid completely off. The next morning, I weighed it again. 4.5 pounds. I told Evan, and he just stared at me, eyes red. "She's moving between us," he whispered. "What?" "She doesn't want to stay still. She wants both of us to remember." The days blurred. We stopped working, stopped eating. Every morning we'd find the urn in a different room, sometimes in the hall, once on the porch swing. The weight kept changing, sometimes lighter, sometimes heavier. Evan started writing down numbers in a notebook, the times, the weights, the nights he heard her whisper. Then one morning, he called me into his room. "She's not in there anymore," he said. The urn sat open on his desk. Empty. "Maybe you spilled." He slammed his hand down. "No." I woke up to her voice. She said she was cold. His voice cracked. She asked me to bring her closer. That's when I saw it. A faint gray dust smudge across his forearm. "Evan, what did you do?" He didn't answer. That night, I heard him talking softly in his room, murmuring like someone on the phone. When I knocked, he said, "Go back to bed." Through the door, I caught a faint sound, whispering. But it wasn't him. It was higher, broken, like breath through teeth. "Evan, open the door." No reply. Just his voice again, calm and slow. "I'll take my turn tonight." The next morning he looked peaceful, pale but smiling. The urn was back on the table, full again. For a moment I just stared at it. The black ceramic looked the same as ever, smooth and unremarkable. But the air around it felt heavy, like the house was holding its breath. Evan poured himself coffee, hands shaking just slightly. "She's calmer now," he said. "She just wanted company." I wanted to scream to tell him this was insane, but something stopped me. His face looked peaceful for the first time in weeks, like he'd finally forgiven himself for something I didn't understand. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the faint clink of the urn's lid moving on and off. By 3 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the kitchen. The light was off. Moonlight from the window spilled across the counter, glinting off the urn's polished surface. The lid sat beside it. A gray smear trailed down the side of the jar to the floor, hand-shaped. My stomach twisted. I reached out, touched the ashes inside. They were warm. I woke Evan. He barely opened his eyes. "It's her night," he murmured. "Don't interrupt her." "She's dead, Evan." He smiled faintly. "Then why can you feel her?" The next morning the urn was light again. 4.1 pounds. I checked the scale 3 times. Evan didn't come out of his room all day. That evening I found a note on the kitchen table, written in his handwriting but shaky. "It's your turn to keep her close. She misses you." I opened his door. The room smelled of smoke and salt. The bed was perfectly made. The window was open. On the dresser, the urn sat half full. On the pillow, ashes. I called his name again and again, but there was no answer. The only sound was wind pushing through the open window and the faint tap of the urn's lid rocking back and forth. When I touched the jar, it felt warm again. I told myself I'd take it to the funeral home the next morning, scatter everything, end this madness. But that night the whisper came. Soft, almost kind. "Please don't leave me alone." It was her. The voice was smaller than I remembered, younger somehow, like she was 13 again and scared of storms. I sat there shaking, tears running down my face. "Lily, you're gone. You have to rest." The whisper came again, closer this time. "Then rest with me." The lid lifted on its own, just slightly, enough for the faintest breath of ash to curl into the air. The smell of her perfume filled the room, that cheap vanilla spray she'd used as a teenager. For one unbearable second, I wanted nothing more than to believe. I don't remember falling asleep. When I woke, the urn was beside me on the nightstand. The weight on the scale that morning, 4.7 pounds. I tried to tell myself Evan had returned somehow, that I was still dreaming. But when I looked closer at the jar, I saw it. Tiny fingerprints pressed into the soot near the rim. Too small to be his. Too perfect to be random. I buried the urn in the backyard that afternoon. I thought that would be enough. That night, the knocking started again. 3 soft taps on the bedroom door. When I opened it, the hallway was empty, but a trail of gray footprints led to my bed. At the end of the trail sat the urn, lid open, a faint warmth rising from inside. I don't remember moving toward it. I only remember the feeling, that weightless, forgiving warmth like someone's arms wrapping around me from behind. Evan's voice whispered against my ear. She's with us again. The next morning, a neighbor found our front door wide open. 2 coffee cups sat on the table, still warm. The house was empty. Only the urn remained, and when they lifted it, the tag underneath read 7.2 pounds. When my brother told me about the sleep study, I thought he was joking. $3,000 for a week in a lab, free food, private room, no phones, easy money, he said, grinning. That was Aaron, always the optimist, even after everything that happened with Mom. I hadn't seen him smile like that in years, not since the accident. He needed the money and I needed the time away. That's how we both justified it. The lab was in Seattle, buried inside a gray corporate building that looked more like an insurance office than a research center. The sign outside read, Somnus Behavioral Institute. They took our phones, our watches, anything that told time. The researcher, a woman named Dr. Veer, explained the protocol. Each participant will spend 7 nights under continuous EEG monitoring. You'll sleep in adjacent rooms, connected by synchronized brainwave analysis. Aaron raised an eyebrow. You mean you'll see our dreams? She smiled, not reassuringly. We'll see patterns of activity. If those patterns align, we can infer shared cognition. I didn't understand half of it, but Aaron nodded like he did. They led us into 2 narrow rooms separated by a glass wall. Each had a bed, a camera, and a tangle of wires snaking up to the ceiling. The only thing between us was the glass. No sound, no direct contact. Before lights out, Aaron mouthed, "Easy money," and gave me a thumbs up. The first night was uneventful. Machines hummed softly. I dreamed of nothing but white light. But on the second night, I dreamed of a hallway. Long, dark, lined with doors that all looked the same. At the end stood Aaron, his back turned, knocking on one of them. When he opened it, I woke up. Dr. Veer met us in the morning, her clipboard pressed against her chest. Interesting synchronization, she said. Both of you woke at the exact same second. Aaron laughed. Guess we're in sync like always. By the 4th night, it wasn't funny anymore. I dreamed of the same hallway again. Only this time the doors were open. Behind each one was something flickering, moving, whispering. And at the end, Aaron stood again, facing a door that hadn't been there before. He opened it slowly, and I heard my name. When I woke, alarms were blaring. The glass between us was fogged over from condensation. Aaron was sitting upright in his bed, eyes open but not blinking. "Is he okay?" I shouted. Technicians rushed in. They injected something, wheeled him out. The next morning, Dr. Veer assured me he was stable. "Just a neurological spike," she said. "His brain activity matched yours almost perfectly." That night, they let him rest in the observation ward. I slept alone for the first time. The dream came again, but this time, he wasn't in it. I walked down the hallway, every door whispering my name. At the end, the new door was open. Inside, I saw Aaron, strapped to the lab bed, electrodes on his temples, eyes wide, staring directly at me. I woke gasping. But when I looked at the glass wall, Aaron's room lights were back on. He was sitting up again, staring straight at me through the glass. He raised his hand slowly and pressed it to the glass. I did the same. And then faintly, I heard his voice in my head. "Don't wake up next time." The words didn't come through the glass, they came from inside, like he'd whispered straight into my thoughts. I stumbled backward, tearing the sensors off my skin. The machine shrieked. Lights flickered to red. By the time staff rushed in, Aaron was unresponsive. His body slumped against the glass, eyes half open. They sedated me and said it was shock. When I woke hours later, Dr. Veer sat beside my bed, clipboard balanced on her knees. "He's stable," she said softly. "His brain activity hasn't stopped. It's just different." "What does that mean?" She hesitated. "It's matching yours again." I pushed the blanket aside. "Then let me see him." She didn't argue. She just led me back to the lab. Aaron was lying in the bed across the glass, still as marble, chest rising shallowly. The EEG monitor beside him was a mess of spikes and oscillations, half of them moving in sync with mine on the adjacent screen. "He's mirroring you," she said. "Every neuron, every REM cycle. It's never happened before." I stared at his face. He looked peaceful, almost content. I whispered, "Aaron, please wake up." His mouth twitched, just slightly. Then my monitor spiked. I felt a rush of vertigo, like falling backward into water. The room went gray. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the lab anymore. I was standing in the same hallway from the dreams. Long, dark, lined with doors. At the far end, Aaron waited, one hand on a knob. He smiled faintly. "You came back." "This isn't real," I said. "We're dreaming." He tilted his head. "No, you're dreaming. I've been awake the whole time." The hallway lights flickered. The doors trembled on their hinges. Behind them came faint noises. Breathing, whispering, the scrape of nails. He gestured for me to follow. "You shouldn't have let them separate us." "Where are we?" "Inside. Where they put us when we closed our eyes together." I started backing away. "We need to wake up, Aaron." He stepped closer. "You still think there's a difference between dreaming and waking. That's why she wanted us." "She?" He pointed at one of the doors. "Dr. Veer isn't studying sleep. She's collecting it. She takes the patterns that match, copies them, merges them. They said we were unique, twins in rhythm. She said our dreams aligned perfectly." I grabbed his shoulders. "Aaron, stop, you're not making sense." His eyes were wide, pupils dilated. "Then why do you feel what I feel?" And then I did. The hum of the machines, the cold electrodes against my temples, the heartbeat that wasn't mine. He leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. "One of us has to stay asleep so the other can leave. It's my turn to rest." I felt his hands on my chest, pushing me backward through the nearest door. I fell, weightless. When I opened my eyes again, I was staring up at the lab ceiling. My head hurt. The wires were gone. Dr. Veer leaned over me, expression tight. "You're awake," she said softly. "What about my brother?" Her lips pressed thin. "He didn't make it." I sat up, dizzy. Through the glass wall, Aaron's bed was empty. Only the indent in the pillow remained. I whispered. "He said one of us had to stay asleep." Dr. Veer didn't answer. She checked my pupils, her hands trembling slightly. "You need to rest." I looked at the EEG monitor beside my bed. 2 patterns, 2 sets of brain waves, moving in perfect sync. "Why are there 2? I asked. She froze. "There aren't." I looked closer. One was labeled Subject 01, Aaron Porter. The other, Subject 02, Aaron Porter. Both still active. That night, when I finally closed my eyes, I found myself back in the hallway. Only this time, the doors were all open. And every room I passed, someone was sleeping. Faces I didn't recognize, all hooked to machines, all twitching like they were dreaming the same dream. At the very end stood Aaron, half in shadow, smiling faintly. Told you it was easy money. He reached for the switch on the wall. "Don't," I started. He flipped it. The lights went out. And in the pitch black, dozens of voices whispered in perfect unison. One sleeps, one wakes. Both remember. When I opened my eyes again, I was in his bed. And across the glass, my body was still breathing. They called us the Harvest Twins. Every year when the crops came in and the air turned sharp with autumn, people in our little Kansas town would say it like a blessing or a warning. Those Harper boys, they always bring a good harvest. But no one ever asked what it cost. My brother Liam and I grew up on 70 acres of corn our family had owned since the 1800s. The land was older than the town, older than the church, older than us. Our father used to say, "This soil remembers everything you give it." When he died, the farm became ours. I was 28. Liam was 28 too, born 3 minutes after me, which he reminded me of constantly. We were identical in every way that mattered, but different where it counted. I wanted out. He wanted roots. After Dad's funeral, we walked the fields together, rows stretching into the horizon. The stalks stood tall and golden, heads heavy like they were listening. The ground under our boots felt warm like it was breathing. Liam turned to me. "We have to do it this year." "Do what?" He didn't answer right away. He kicked at the dirt, then whispered, "You know what he told us?" I laughed, but it came out thin. That's just one of his stories. But it wasn't. Every fall, Dad had a ritual. On the last day of harvest, he'd walk to the center of the field with a lantern and a jar of soil, muttering words that sounded more like pleading than prayer. We never understood it. He said it was an old family promise. That year after the funeral, Liam wanted to keep it going. He said the land wouldn't forgive us if we didn't. I told him he was crazy. Then the ground split open near the western field. Not wide, not deep, just a narrow crack stretching through the rows. And from that crack came a sound I can still hear when the wind blows right. A low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat under the soil. Liam's eyes lit up. "It's ready." He said it like he'd been waiting for it. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the fields sway under the moonlight. Around 2 a.m., I saw a light moving through the corn. A lantern. Liam. I grabbed my boots and went after him. When I reached the center of the field, the air felt heavy, humid, and wrong. Liam stood there shirtless, sweat dripping down his back, the lantern at his feet. In his hands, he held the old jar of soil Dad used every year. "It wants us to finish what he started," he said. "What are you talking about?" "The land," he whispered. "It gave us this life. It gave us everything. It only asks for balance." I shook my head. "Balance?" He was delusional, Liam. "You saw what this farm did to him." He smiled faintly. "He didn't die from the land. He died for it." Before I could stop him, he plunged his hand into the jar. The soil inside writhed, actually moved, like something alive. He pulled out a clump of it and smeared it across his chest, murmuring Dad's old words. I stepped back. "Liam, stop." But the ground trembled. The rows of corn rustled though there was no wind, and the heartbeat beneath my feet grew louder. Liam dropped to his knees, laughing. "It knows us." Then he looked up at me, eyes wide, pupils blown black. "It remembers." And in that moment, I realized something awful. Dad never told us what the offering was. Liam reached out his hand, trembling. "You have to finish it with me." I turned and ran. The sound followed me all the way to the house, that steady pulse in the ground, chasing me like a living thing. By sunrise, Liam was gone. But when I looked out the kitchen window, I saw two sets of footprints leading back into the field. Only one came back out. I told myself I'd imagined it, that Liam wandered into town, that he'd show up laughing about it later. But the truth sat heavy in my chest, the way the air did before a storm. That day I tried to work, but the machines stalled. The combine belts seized, the tractor wouldn't start. Even the barn radio was nothing but static. The land had gone still as if waiting. By evening, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and walked back into the rows. The corn was taller than before. Swollen, the ears glistening with a wet sheen that wasn't dew. When I brushed a leaf, it stuck to my arm, leaving a smear the color of rust. The pulse started again, slow, patient. I followed it to the center of the field. The lantern was still there, lying on its side. Next to it, half buried in soil, was Liam's shirt. I called his name. My voice sounded swallowed. The stalks didn't sway. They leaned, bending toward me like they were listening. Something cracked under my boot. I lifted my foot and saw a bone. Small, clean, pale. Too clean. That's when I heard him, behind me. "Don't ruin it." Liam stepped out from between the stalks. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, his eyes glassy, his smile too calm. "It's done," he said softly. "It's what Dad wanted." "What the hell did you do?" He gestured to the soil. It was our turn. I shined the flashlight at him and froze. His hands were black up to the wrists, fingers caked with soil that writhed against his skin like tiny worms. He took a step closer. It didn't want both of us this time. It just wanted one. The air shifted. The pulse quickened. The ground beneath me pulsed back. Liam's grin faltered. "It shows you." Before I could react, the earth split open beneath my feet. Cold dirt wrapped around my boots like hands pulling me under. I screamed, but the sound died in my throat as the soil filled my mouth thick and metallic. Liam knelt beside me, whispering, "Don't fight it. It's balance." I clawed at the dirt, at him, but he didn't move. His pupils had vanished into black. The soil swallowed me to the chest before I finally stopped struggling. Then everything went quiet. I woke up hours later on the porch. The sunrise painted the fields gold again. My clothes were dry, my mouth clean. For a moment I thought I'd dreamed it all. Then I saw Liam sitting on the steps, hands folded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Morning," he said, voice calm, steady. I sat beside him. "What happened?" He smiled. "You finished the promise." When I looked down, my fingernails were packed with black soil. That night I couldn't sleep. The field whispered outside, soft, rhythmic, the same heartbeat. But this time, it matched mine. I went to the bathroom mirror to wash the dirt from under my nails, but the reflection didn't follow. It smiled, and in that reflection, two figures stood behind me, both wearing my face. One of them whispered, "Harvest's due." The next morning, the crops were greener than they'd ever been. And when I walked to the edge of the field, I saw footprints again, two sets leading in, none coming out. The first thing you notice about the cabin is how it listens. When I walked inside, the air didn't echo, it absorbed. My sister Hannah and I inherited the place after our aunt passed. An old wooden cabin tucked into the spine of the Appalachians, 2 hours from the nearest gas station. We hadn't been here since we were kids. Back then, the place scared us. The walls had these built-in intercom speakers in every room, brass-grilled things with tiny red lights. Our aunt called them the listeners. "Old-fashioned security," she'd said, "so we don't have to shout across the house." But I remembered nights when the lights flickered on by themselves, when we'd hear voices whispering even after she'd gone to bed. After Aunt Margot died, Hannah insisted we drive up for one weekend. Just to clear it out, sell it, move on. I agreed, mostly because she sounded exhausted. Since Dad's funeral, we'd barely spoken. The road up was steep and fog-heavy, a tunnel of pines swallowing the car. When the cabin appeared through the haze, it looked smaller than I remembered, hunched like it had been listening too long. Inside, everything smelled like dust and electricity. The power still worked somehow. When I flipped the main switch, all 10 of the old intercom lights blinked red, one after another, like eyes waking up. Hannah laughed it off. Creepy, right? We started packing boxes. The rooms were exactly as we'd left them. Old photos, books with brittle pages, and that heavy silence that eats sound instead of holding it. Around midnight, while Hannah slept upstairs, I sat in the kitchen with a beer and turned on the main intercom. Static hissed back, sharp and alive. Then faintly, a voice. Hello? I froze. The voice was hers, not Hannah's. Our other sister, June, the one who went missing 15 years ago. My throat locked. June? A pause. Then through the static, don't let her in. The red light flickered, then died. I sat there shaking until Hannah came down, half awake. I told her what I heard. She frowned, confused. You're overtired. You miss her. That's all. But when I turned back to the intercom panel, the kitchen light labeled Upstairs, Bedroom 2 was glowing faint red. Hannah's room. We hadn't touched it. I lifted the receiver, my hand trembling. At first, just static. Then a single breath. Soft, slow, and then Hannah's voice, but warped, like it had traveled 100 miles through wires. She's already inside. I dropped the receiver. The light blinked twice, then went out. That night I barely slept. Every few hours the house clicked, old wood settling, power humming. But underneath it all was the faint hiss of the intercom, as if it was still turned on somewhere. When morning came, Hannah looked pale. I heard her too, she said quietly. She kept saying my name. We tried to laugh it off, but neither of us went near the panels that day. Still, the static seemed louder, like the cabin was tuning itself. Around dusk, we found something in the basement, a notebook, our aunt's handwriting. It was a log, dates, times, transcriptions of voices heard through the intercom, and at the last page, written in shaking ink, they're not speakers, they're microphones. They don't listen to you, they listen through you. Hannah looked up, face drained of color. What does that mean? Before I could answer, every red light in the cabin turned on. All at once. Every red light in the cabin glowed like tiny eyes in the dark. The air buzzed, thick with a low hum that felt alive. Hannah and I stood frozen in the living room, surrounded by whispers that crawled out of the intercoms. Words we couldn't make out, just murmurs overlapping, building. Then one voice rose above the rest. Let her speak. It wasn't June's voice this time. It was Aunt Margot's. Hannah covered her ears. Make it stop. I ran to the main panel by the kitchen door and slammed the power switch. The lights flickered, but the sound didn't stop. The whispering turned into static, and underneath it, laughter. Childish laughter, from the upstairs hall. We stared at each other. Neither of us wanted to move first. Finally, I grabbed a flashlight and started up the stairs. The boards groaned, the air colder with every step. When I reached the landing, the intercom light outside bedroom 2 was pulsing red, steady, like a heartbeat. I pressed the talk button. June? Silence. Then, come in. The door creaked open on its own. The flashlight beam trembled in my hand. The room was empty, except for the small speaker in the corner, its red eye blinking. Hannah came up behind me, whispering, She's not gone, is she? Before I could answer, the intercom hissed and June's voice filled the room. One listens, one stays. We both froze. Hannah shook her head. That's what she said last time. What? She looked at me, tears welling. The night she disappeared, I heard her on the intercom. She said that exact thing before she went outside. Her voice broke, and I let her go. The static swelled until it drowned everything. My ears rang. The red light on the intercom turned white. A cold, piercing white. And then it spoke again. But this time, it wasn't June's voice. It was mine. She's not outside anymore. The sound came from every room at once. Downstairs, the lights flickered in rhythm with the voice. The cabin itself seemed to breathe. Hannah backed away. "Please stop." I turned to her, but the light from the intercom cast our shadows on the wall, and in the outline. There were 3 of us. The third one stood still, smaller, hands pressed against the wall, as if inside it. I ran forward, pounding the boards, screaming June's name. The wall vibrated like something was behind it, and then faintly a small hand pushed back from the other side. The boards split. Dust poured out. For a second I saw her face, gray, thin, eyes too wide, whispering through the crack, "Don't let her stay." Before I could reach her, the wall sealed again. The red lights went out. Silence fell so thick it felt solid. Hannah stood shaking, staring at the wall where June's face had been. Then she whispered, "It doesn't want her. It wants us." The power in the cabin died. Total black. The only sound was breathing. Mine, hers, and something else beneath the floor. I grabbed Hannah's wrist. "We're leaving." But when I pulled her toward the door, she didn't move. Her head tilted slightly like she was listening. The intercom in the hall glowed faint red again. "One listens." Her lips moved. "One stays." And before I could stop her, she turned and walked back toward the kitchen, the faint red glow following her like a trail of eyes. I shouted her name, but the door slammed shut. The intercom lights dimmed one by one, until only the main speaker on the wall stayed lit. Static filled the room. Then her voice came through. Soft. Calm. "It's okay. I can hear her now." I drove away that night and never went back. The cabin was sold, burned down a year later in a lightning strike. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I hear it again. The faint hiss of static, a soft click, then a breath, and a voice whispering through the walls of my apartment. One listens. One stays. I always tell myself I'm imagining it, but last week I unplugged every speaker in the house, and I can still hear her, listening. You don't notice when reality slips. It doesn't crack like glass, it folds, quietly, neatly, until the seams of your life line up wrong, and you can't remember how it ever fit. The morning it started, rain tapped the kitchen window like fingers. The clock said 7:14 a.m., same as always. The smell of coffee drifted down the hall. Ordinary, except my brother had been dead for 5 years. "Mornin', sleepyhead," Mason called. His voice floated down the hallway the way it used to before work, half teasing, half tired. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. The house looked exactly as it had the day of the crash. Same chipped paint, same crooked blinds, but everything felt rehearsed. When I reached the kitchen, he was there. Alive, real, wearing the same gray hoodie he died in. He slid a mug toward me. "You still take it black, right?" My mouth was dry. "You can't be here." He smiled. "That's one way to say good morning." The sound of the rain grew louder, pounding now, though outside the sky was clear. Mason didn't seem to notice. "Sit down," he said. "We need to talk before the loop resets." "The what?" He stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking in perfect rhythm. "You always ask that. Every time." I stepped back. The air around him shimmered, heat on asphalt. My hands trembled. "This isn't real." "That's what you said last time." He reached into his pocket and dropped a small metal key on the table. It was bent, blackened. The teeth melted. "Do you remember the crash?" he asked. "I remember losing control." "You remember begging," he corrected softly. "You said you couldn't live without me." My throat closed. "Mason, stop." "You made a trade." He tapped the key. "Door 9. Every time you open it, you come back here. You keep trying to undo it, but you never make it past sunrise. The walls creaked. Deep, wet, breathing sounds. Mason? I whispered. Why are you saying this? He looked at me with that same crooked grin. Because it's your turn again. Lightning flashed even though the sky stayed blue. When I blinked, the kitchen was empty. The mug was cold. The clock on the wall read 7:14 a.m., the exact second I'd woken up. By noon, I convinced myself I'd dreamed it. The day moved normally. Emails, errands, sunlight spilling across the floor. But every mirror showed a frame of lag, like my reflection was half a second behind. At 3:06 p.m., the doorbell rang. No one stood outside, only wet footprints leading down the steps to the driveway. My car keys were gone. When I looked up, Mason was across the street waving. I ran toward him, shouting his name. The pavement stretched longer with every step. By the time I reached the other side, he was gone. Only the crash site remained, still fenced off, the ditch swallowed by weeds. Something glinted in the mud, a license plate, bent in half. I pulled it free. It read 9, MS 414, 9, Mason 14, the numbers from the clock. Behind me, a voice whispered, "You're early this time." I spun around, the road was empty. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. 7:14. Start again. The sky flickered. Cars froze mid-motion, raindrops suspended in the air. The world folded in on itself like paper being creased. I blinked, and I was back in bed. The clock. 7:14 a.m. The smell of coffee. His voice. "Morning, sleepyhead. You're gonna be late." My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't stand. "Mason," I whispered. "Please don't." He smiled exactly as before. "You say that every time." I forced myself to look past him toward the hallway mirror. Two of me. One standing here. One already sitting at the kitchen table holding a mug. And both whispering the same thing under their breath, perfectly in sync. Door 9. The reflection smiled. "You remember now, don't you?" The world tilted. The walls rippled like water. The mirror's surface bubbled outward, forming a handle. Metal. Blackened. With melted teeth. The same key. I reached for it without meaning to. Mason's hand covered mine. "Don't open it yet," he said. "Why not?" "Because once you see what's behind it, you'll never stop trying to fix it." The air stuttered, color draining from the room. Everything froze except his eyes, glowing faintly white. He leaned close and whispered, "You already failed 8 times." The mirror cracked, and through the split, I saw something move. A road under storm clouds, headlights turning, the split second before metal screams. My body locked. The clock on the wall struck 7:15 for the first time in 5 years, and Mason said, "Now it's time for 9. The words hung in the air like pressure. Every sound outside the kitchen, wind, rain, traffic, flattened into silence. Mason's reflection in the mirror blinked once, then smiled. "Ready?" Before I could answer, the mirror's surface rippled outward and swallowed the room in silver light. I stumbled backward into weightlessness. When the world snapped back into focus, I was standing on a road slick with rain. Headlights glared through the fog. Mine. And Mason's car lay sideways in the ditch exactly as I remembered. The smell of gasoline, wet metal, earth. The moment before everything went wrong. I ran toward the wreck. Mason. He was still behind the wheel, blood running down his temple, eyes half open. When he saw me, he smiled. Same tired, almost forgiving smile. "You always show up late," he said. I reached for the door handle, but my hand passed through it like smoke. He reached back, our palms overlapping without touching. "You begged for a trade," he said softly, "and you got it. The crash didn't take me, it took you. You just keep trying to switch back." Lightning split the sky. I saw flashes of other scenes through the rain. A mirror in a dark bedroom, a barn full of whispering corn, a radio tower, a sleep lab monitor blinking. All of them looping, overlapping, breaking apart. I staggered back. What are those? Versions, he said. Every sibling who's ever tried to fix what they broke. Every one of us. The horizon folded like film melting. Each loop, each story, was another life I'd stolen, another trade gone wrong. The ground buckled. The sky turned inside out. Mason stepped from the wreck. No wounds, no shadow. You think you're special because you remember, he said. But the land, the glass, the wires, they all remember too. They keep the pattern alive. He held up the melted key. Door 9 wasn't supposed to open. It keeps everything connected. The air around us shimmered. Behind him, 8 other doors flickered in a circle of light. 8 realities, 8 failed trades. Through one, I saw a woman speaking into an intercom. Through another, a boy sinking into soil. Through another, a pair of twins staring at each other through glass. All of them turned toward me at once. End it, they whispered. Mason pressed the key into my hand. You can stop it, but you have to stay this time. What happens if I don't? He smiled gently. Then we start over. Door 10. The rain froze mid-fall. Time held its breath. I looked at him, my brother, my mirror, and felt the world tilt. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd been the echo all along. I turned the key. The sound was like glass breaking underwater. Light poured through the cracks, bright and endless. Mason's voice faded. Sleep, little brother. I'll take the next one. Everything collapsed inward. Roads, houses, mirrors, walls, until there was only the sound of a clock ticking. 7:14 a.m. The smell of coffee. A voice from the kitchen. Mornin', sleepyhead. You're gonna be late. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Rain tapped the window like fingers. The clock read 7:15. For the first time, it had moved forward. I smiled, shaking, half relieved, until I noticed the mug waiting on the nightstand. Black coffee, steam rising. The mug was engraved with one word, May S. 9. And when I looked in the mirror, the reflection smiled first.